There's children involved a lot of the time. And our first instinct is to prioritize them. Well, that's not necessarily always the best option. The very best option is for you to prioritize yourself, and they reap the benefits of that. It's a win-win. Be patient with yourself. This is a skill. And everybody thinks happiness is just supposed to happen organically out of nowhere. But if you take the time and you do the work, and there's work involved. If you take the time and you do the work, outcomes can't be bad. They're always going to be favorable.
Do you think that as human beings, we try to control everything? Like, is that?
No, I actually think that a lot of times we get lazy and we make ourselves victims of things because it's easier, right?
Right. Like, this is not a quick fix. Forgiveness takes time. It's not like, okay, today I'm forgiving and it's all over. It can come back. I mean,
yeah.
Like,
you have to do it over and over and over again. And it's important to note too that by no means is it condoning a behavior.
Welcome to the Just Separated podcast. Hi, I'm Karen Oman, a thanatologist, grief counselor, divorce strategist, and co-author of the Just Separated workbook. I draw on years of personal and professional experience to guide you through the challenges of your divorce. Together, with our expert guests, we'll equip you with the clarity, resilience, and tools to take charge and move forward with confidence. Follow Just Separated and join us as we explore the many different facets of divorce. Welcome to the Just Separated podcast. I'm your host, Karen Oman, co-founder of the Divorce Workshop. Today, we're going to be talking about navigating separation and divorce through the lens of happiness, or at the very least, civility. Our guest expert is Kathleen Desloges. Kathleen is the founder of Mission Happy Lab, which is dedicated to the research and education of scientifically based practices and skills that support happiness and well-being. She was a classroom teacher for 30 years and has always been passionate about empowering individuals to pursue happiness as a choice. Kathleen is a certified happiness coach and has completed Yale's University Science of Well-being certificate. She loves a lively discussion around all aspects of happiness and enjoys speaking on all kinds of stages, platforms, forums, and workshops. Welcome, Kathleen, to the Just Separated podcast.
Well, thank you so much, Karen. I looked forward to being here.
So I think for myself, as I reflect back, when I went through my divorce, I never thought of thinking of it through the lens of happiness, right? Because I felt like I was more surviving the storm that I was going through. But I realized, like when you and I talked before, that I maybe had some moments of clarity or moments of empowerment or even some hope throughout that I didn't even identify as changing my lenses of it all, if that makes sense to you. So do you think that people going through divorce can actively create a space for happiness, or does that old saying, like, it comes later, right?
I think they need to try, at the very least. And a lens, that essentially means perception. It's your perception of your circumstances in that moment. If we look at it in terms of what control do I have in this moment, and then we pause, we reflect, and we accept a lot of the circumstances in accountability, we have a lot more control going forward. So that's really important as far as I'm concerned in terms of setting up our perspective for what we're up against.
Do you think that as human beings, we try to control everything? Like, is that?
No, I actually think that a lot of times we get lazy and we make ourselves victims of things because it's easier, right? So it's easy to say, my partner treated me such and such, this and that, did this, their behavior was blah, 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 blah. And now, yourself a victim. I didn't do anything. I was a victim of this behavior. Well, that takes all the control away from you in how you move forward. You've now created yourself as a victim. And there's really not a lot of power in that.
Yeah. So let's just dive deeper into that lens, like the title of this, right? Like the lens of happiness. So you had mentioned perception. So what do you exactly mean by shifting the lenses in or the perception when you're going through divorce?
Well, we have a lot of options that we don't necessarily acknowledge in that moment. First of all, we have to consider that we might not be alone in the process. So we have children. There's children involved a lot of the time. And our first instinct is to prioritize them. Well, that's not necessarily always the best option. The very best option is for you to prioritize yourself, and they reap the benefits of that. It's a win-win. So that's kind of the first shift that people have a hard time with. And the second shift in the lens or in the accountability, in the perception, is the accountability piece. And people have a really, really hard time with this. How I accountable for to make myself accountable for everything that's happened. So all of these horrible things have happened, and you go to your friends and you go to your family members and you paint yourself as the victim. Well, what if you went and said, these are all the bad things that have happened. Here's what I'm going to do about it. There's your accountability piece. You don't have to condone anything that's happened, and you don't have to wear all the behaviors. You just have to acknowledge them and say, this is what's happened. I accept that. And now here's what I'm going to do about it. And this is giving yourself some agency and some control over your circumstances. And I think that's really key in the whole process. If you make yourself a victim, you're basically just sitting back and letting everything happen to you. If you can manage to figure out how to take control and maintain accountability in the situation, the outcome is bound to be a lot greater. And your kids are going to benefit from that. They're going to see a situation where a parent is powerful, accountable, in control, and doing things in their best interest. No better example than that.
So that's kind of what we put in our workbook, the kind of responsibility pie. Would that be kind of the same thing?
Yeah.
So, yeah. So, we know in any breakup or divorce, responsibility is hard, right? Right. But it takes reflection, right? And I think you're onto something there, because I think if you understand that you had some responsibility, however big or small it is, it can kind of shift your mindset.
Yeah. It helps you. It doesn't necessarily, and it might change the perspective of the partner in the process. Like they may have to reevaluate how they move forward based on your responses. Mm-hmm. So one never knows, right? Like every situation is different. But it's really important to pause, acknowledge, evaluate, and then decide how you're going to respond. That feels like a long process. It's not. It can happen in a moment. If we can switch from a reactive to a responsive mindset in those situations, you're way ahead of the game already.
Yeah, that's another thing we teach as well, right? To not react, but to respond.
Yeah.
Is there in your coaching, is there also a talk about self-compassion?
Oh, empathy, compassion, and self-care are all key components to helping you maintain a healthy nervous system throughout this process. And I talk about your nervous system a lot because it can really be damaged through both macro and micro traumas in your life. And divorce obviously qualifies as one of those. So you don't want to get into a situation where you process a situation inappropriately and it's caused a trauma for you or a lot of traumas for you. So mindfulness, compassion. Imagine being able to look at the other person's situation from the vantage point of how are they feeling right now, or why are they responding the way that they are. We almost never do that, but it's so helpful in how we respond, and it usually will soften the situation in any given moment when you can employ those things. Forgiveness is another interesting tool, and I hope we get to that one too, because it really, really is something that has really given people a lot of struggle.
Yeah, I have that question here. Like, it's a heavy lift to forgive, right? If you've been
Mm,
betrayed, either, by affairs or financially or with the children, whatever. I mean, so forgiveness, can be a hard aspect, but we can go deeper on that if you want about, what I've learned from forgiveness in my schooling is that you can let go for yourself. Doesn't mean you might get an official apology from your ex, right, for doing all that,
that's not the
right?
goal.
Yeah.
That's not the goal. The goal is obviously to lighten it for you. It might be a matter of writing a letter and putting all of those feelings on paper, but never sending it. Or having a little ritual where you write the letter, you read it aloud, and then you burn it. Or something of that nature. It's going to shift your subconscious a little. You've lightened something, and therefore you've affected your nervous system in a positive way.
And decreasing the anger. Like, we can
Yep.
talk about anger because I'm going to tell you, Kathleen, anger is probably the biggest emotion that people who are just separating or divorcing go through. So if
And
we
it's
c-
the antithesis of happiness.
yeah, I was going to say
Yeah.
they're kind of on the different spectrum. And so if you can lift some of that anger, I guess that goes back to what we've been talking about. The lenses are shifting, right? So
Yep.
if you can start lightening some of the load that you're carrying, because
Right.
you can also have, other things coming at you, like legal bills that can make you angry or scared. So it would be good to lighten some of the other load if possible.
Right. And then again, I go back to you've got kids to worry about too. These are all things that come up. You feel like you're spinning a lot of plates through the process. If you can just take some of those and put them down for a while, it makes it easier to deal with the stuff that you have to in that moment. So forgiving, taking that off your plate, taking that anger away makes it a whole lot easier to move forward, I would suspect.
Yeah, I think so. And I think we have to just make it clear that forgiveness is different for everybody in the length, right? Like, this is not a quick fix. Forgiveness takes time. It's not like, okay, today I'm forgiving and it's all over. It can come back. I
Yeah.
mean, like,
You have to do it over and over and over again. And it's important to note too that by no means is it condoning a behavior. Like you don't have to condone what that person did, but you have to acknowledge that it wasn't about you and you can let it not be about you, right? You can let it go.
I guess that comes down to having acceptance of
Mm,
what is, right?
yep. Yeah, I have a family member who likes to lean into grudges. And, that's, it doesn't help your health. It doesn't help your nervous system, your well being. It doesn't help your family members. It doesn't help anything. There's absolutely no upside to grudges. So if we can figure out how to erase those grudges and forgive people, everybody wins. And not necessarily the person you're holding a grudge against, because they might not even know you've forgiven them. You don't need to acknowledge that to them. You have to acknowledge it for you.
Think about all the energy. That's another thing having that I've gone through quite a tough divorce and I'm a child of divorce.
Mm,
I think of all the energy that my parents, especially my dad, did to my mother, and my own situation. It's a lot of energy to carry,
yeah.
right? So I'm thinking that when you're going through these hard times, if you can even find macro moments of that savor. Like, I'm going to tell you a story. So I left my husband in February and I took my girls up north to my sister's cottage, what we do every year.
Mm-hmm.
And I was in a lot of grief, and it wasn't grief that it was a lot of grief because I failed and we were playing a board game, and all of us were playing a board game, and I laughed so hard. I was on the floor. Like, literally, I was, that tummy laugh where it hurts, and I was on the floor, and I don't think I've laughed like that in years. And did that ever feel great? And it was such a flashbulb
That's a
moment.
release of energy. It's a release of energy. You needed to do that in that moment, and it didn't matter. That could have been equally have been a cry. It's just that's how our nervous system works. We need to release energy, and we figure out a way to do that. And it's all positive. And I always stress that because as a happiness coach, I get asked all the time, well, how come the people are telling me to be happy all the time? And you can't be happy all the time. We're not built that way. And if we don't release some of that negative energy in a very productive way without hurting people, we're hurting ourselves. So you can't always be happy. You can evaluate every situation and determine whether it's appropriate to be happy and then choose to be, but you can't always be happy. There's
Yeah.
just no way.
Yeah, I think that that was kind of what was like a while back. I don't know. I can't remember the time. Maybe 10 years ago. It was like you have to be happy. You have to be happy. The psychology of happiness came out, right? And I took
Yep.
that course, and it was like, and it almost felt like too much pressure, right? Because I'm like, we are human beings, and we are allowed to feel sad, mad,
Mm-hmm.
happy. I think there's the four core ones, and I'm forgetting the other one. But that's kind of what we have
Yes.
feelings that you can be happy-ish 1 minute and then watch a TV show and crying and your child makes you mad. Like it's just like it's
Yeah.
so
I have a kids program that is called Happy on Purpose. And it follows Charlie, who goes throughout his day and talks to all the adults and tells them how Charlie's going to go somewhere and do something that's going to make him happy on purpose. And then eventually, Charlie gets asked the question, where are you going to be happy today? What are you going to do? And he says, no, today's not that day. Today, I need to feel sad. And I'm going to go find that one person that I feel safe with so that I can be sad and they can be with me. So I teach this at a very, very young age that it's okay. And you need to do it, and you need to do it in a healthy manner, because if you don't do it when you're a kid and you don't see examples of that when you're a kid, it's going to jump up and bite you when you're an adult, and you're going to have things to work through then.
I think that's also good to talk about when you're going through something really difficult. Because I'm a thanatologist as well. I'm a grief counselor, so I always say to people, lean in, right? So
Mm-hmm.
when you think about what you just said there with a child, it could be saying it's the exact same for a human being. When you're having a sad day, acknowledge that you're having a sad day, right?
Yeah,
Like lean into that, express it however you want to. I mean, we can talk
feel
about
it,
tools and feel it, right? I
feel it.
feel this way because, right? That's another
And
tip I give.
when we don't feel things, we look for ways to prevent ourselves from feeling things. And that leads to addiction and behavior issues that are hard to undo. That's the reason that these things happen, is because we're not actively feeling our feelings and processing them appropriately.
So is happiness something we pursue or is it something we create?
I would say we create it. And we, so if, let's say you've got, okay, two people, let's call them twins, okay? And they both experience exactly the same circumstance, down to every detail. And one of them feels differently than the other. It's because of the way that they process and the skills that they use to process the situation. One of them might not have felt so terrible about it. We get to choose the skills we employ to eventually feel how we feel. So if we see things through the lens of compassion, it shifts how we feel. If we take accountability for a situation, it shifts how we feel. Just the idea of choice itself. Oh, I have a choice in this situation. I'm not totally out of control. I get to choose some things. Or you can reframe stuff. Sometimes when we feel a little bit anxious or nervous, we can turn that over into excitement and anticipation. Because all physiologically, it's all the same feelings. So if you make that choice and you flip it, inevitably will have a better outcome.
So how would you do that? Like, so is that we would say that's reframing, right? It's
Right.
it's reframing your thought patterns. So would that be through affirmations, writing it on walls, or not on walls, but writing it on your fridge, like a sticker? Like how would you get people to start reframing? Because I can tell you the negative talk, we all have it. We're all prone to negativity. When you're going through a divorce, it's even more because you're overwhelmed with everything. So
Hmm.
affirmations type of help, stopping that patterns of behavior when you start beating yourself up. Is there any other tips, any tips you have about that?
Well, it starts with acknowledgement and evaluation of your situation. Start with how you're feeling. Acknowledge the feelings that are going on in your body. Are your palms sweating? Is your heart is your heart fluttering? Like, are you feeling butterflies? Do you have a headache, or are you sweating, or all of these things? So if you start there and you acknowledge that, then you ask yourself why. What control does this situation have over me? Oh, well, I could probably do that differently, or I could probably calm down, or I could probably pause, or there's all these little things we can do just to settle our nervous system down and acknowledge where we are in that moment. That's a great start, but you have to keep doing that over and over and over again because we get stuck in fight or flight. Okay, and a divorce is a really good example of that. Fight or flight just has you responding the same way all of the time, and it becomes habitual. So we have to learn a new skill through that event. So if you can stop, you can do a body scan, figure out how you're feeling, and then say, what can I do to feel? Maybe it's a matter of leaving the room, doing something different rather than reacting. Could be the idea that you could just go get a drink of water and take your core body temperature down. Just do something to alter that fight or flight mechanism. And like you said, you can start journaling and messaging and putting affirmations up. Just change the response over and over and over again until your body believes it.
Yeah, and I think we have to also mention too, this is a practice, right? Like we
Yeah.
mentioned this before. It is. So all these tools that you use, which are unique to everybody, you
Mm-hmm.
have to keep working on. I know from my own experience, I'm still working on forgiving my ex because it's been terrible divorce and so there is, it's not for him, it's for me, right?
Yeah.
And this is years. So I'm like, it's a practice. And so just like we're saying, the body scan, especially for people that have come out of high conflict, that's a really good point. We call it interoception, right? Where it's like you look at the
Yep.
body, how are you breathing? Me, I feel it in my chest, right? And
Mm-hmm.
I'll even acknowledge it to myself saying, Karen, I'm having an anxious day today, right? Why am I having an anxious day today, right? And then I can
Yeah.
journal about
Question.
that. Yeah, like question it.
Yep. I always tell those who I'm speaking to about this, it's like curiosity. Employ curiosity throughout your day. Ask yourself questions about anything that is hard or troubling, or um, or you're having a hard time figuring out how to respond to. Ask yourself the appropriate questions. We're doing that in my household. Like, we're living in crazy times right now, and social media is feeding that narrative and agenda. So I get family members coming to me going, look what's going on in my phone. What's going on in my phone? And my immediate response is, okay, what are the questions we can ask ourselves about that? And if you ask yourself all of the right questions, even if you don't have the answers, if you ask yourself all the right questions, it lightens the energy. It just kind of pokes a hole in what social media or mainstream media is trying to do in that moment to your nervous system. Okay, because that's their bread and butter. So it's the same with divorce. Like, sometimes, especially lawyers, they like to get the energy up because it kind of feeds their agenda. Mediators, not so much. They're looking to diffuse it. But oftentimes, lawyers are always looking for their favorite outcome, and they'll go at it by any means necessary. So you always have to ask yourself, who's benefiting from this particular situation? Or what could I do differently to attain a different outcome? Or just be curious. Always be curious.
Yeah, I remember when I would go to my lawyer, I would be so nervous.
Mm,
And I remember saying, "Why am I so nervous to go see my lawyer? It shouldn't really be that way, right?
Yep.
Like, so that's another thing I just want to let our listeners know that, don't be, if you're really nervous seeing your own lawyer, that's a sign, because
Yep.
that
Red flag.
my body was like really reacting, right? I couldn't eat and my digestive issues. And I was like, this
Hmm.
is not normal. This person should make me feel comfortable and warm and supportive. So anyways, that's a side tip on our topic, but it's just
Yep.
an important one. But are there any, before we wrap up, because this has been a great discussion, is there any other tips or practices that you can tell people? I mean, we've talked about a bunch already, but is there any other ones that you want to talk about before we wrap up?
Journaling seems to be so underrated. Like people talk about journaling all the time. What you have to remember with happiness practices or mindfulness practices or any of those things, it's important. You're going to do them if you understand why. And that's what I'm finding now, especially when I was teaching kids about happiness. They're not going to buy in unless you explain to them why. So we got all like when we're talking about gratitude, for instance, people like that's a buzzword now. You have to be more you have to show more gratitude. You have to feel more gratitude. Well, why? Well, I tell my kids if you wake up in the morning and you put, and I tell this to adults too. It's transferable for sure. You put your feet on the floor and just think about maybe up to three things that really, really generate some energy for you, that you get really excited about, that you really love, or, something that really shifts you. And you can't just think it, you have to feel it as well. And then I get a hand up. Well, why are we doing that? Well, because it changes your entire body and brain chemistry. It is free medicine. And if it's free, I'm in. Okay. And it's going to make you stronger. Kids need to be able to relate to things. So it's going to make you stronger. It's going to make you smarter. It's going to make you bigger. It's going to do things for your body over time that is going to be beneficial. There's no downside to this. So as a little person, you're going to internalize that, and that might come up for you over time. And you're going to remember why more than you're going to remember the how.
I love that, Kathleen. I've never heard that before explained that way. The why.
Yeah.
It's really necessary, because then you go, yeah, okay, I'll do it now.
Yeah, I resisted meditation and qigong for the longest time. I was told it would be beneficial for me. I resisted it and resisted it and resisted it until it was explained to me physiologically, until it was laid out. Like with meditation, it was always, well, what is the outcome and what am I going to get out of this, and what should I be looking for? No, no. If you do it, this is what's going to happen. You don't have to feel it. You don't have to. When you do it, this is what's going to happen over time. So once I internalized that, it made it easier for me to go to that practice. And it's like going to the gym. Would you lift all those weights time and time again if you didn't understand what the outcome was going to be? No, you wouldn't do it. So, and it's like practicing an instrument. I was a music teacher for 30 years, so I heard a lot of really, really bad music. And so it's true. My hearing took the hit and everything. But they wouldn't, like, it has to be explained to them that if you do this, you might end up sounding like this. This is where and you might have all these opportunities unfold for you in music. You might end up in a rock band. You might, like all of these things could happen because you're not going to endure that pain if there isn't an outcome that's favorable for you. So yeah, the why is hugely important. And I find practices and skills will stick better if it's attached to a why.
Yeah, that's brilliant. That's brilliant. But so before we wrap up, do you have any other tips before I ask the last question I do with every guest?
Be patient with yourself. This is a skill. And everybody thinks happiness is just supposed to happen organically out of nowhere. But if you take the time and you do the work, and there's work involved, if you take the time and you do the work, the outcomes can't be bad. They're always going to be favorable. And it might be incremental, it might take a long time, but you're going to see some short-term gains. You might not recognize them right away, but they're there. So you have to be patient with yourself, and self-care is paramount. Remember that self-care not only helps you, but it trickles down to those you're close to. Those are really, really important. And happiness does not happen to you. You choose to embrace happiness in any given moment. And that's one of my big leads is happiness is a choice. It's not always the right choice, but it is an option for you. Like I said, sometimes you have to lean into those hard feelings and you might not be happy. But when happiness is a choice, you can develop skills to receive that over and over and over again until it's easy.
Yeah. Yeah, I think everybody who's going through a divorce or a breakup should listen to that because it's a choice, right? Yeah.
You can choose to be angry. It's easier to be angry than it is to be the higher ground traveling person. It's easier. It's easier to hold a grudge than it is to forgive. I'm not saying any of this is going to be easy, but the work will be worth it.
I also think just this is important to talk about for everybody who's going through this to just reflect and really think hard about it, right? Because when you're in it,
Pause.
yeah, I love that. Like just pause, just kind of, and maybe this will help people just change their mindset just a little bit and think, oh, remember what Kathleen said, right? Because it's so hard to get through it. So if we can create space and think about the tools that we talked about today, I think it can be helpful. Anyways, I asked this question for everybody. So here we go. For someone who's just separated, whether they left or were left, what advice would you give them to help navigate those overwhelming early days?
I think we just probably summed that up. I think it's really about self-care and learning to respond over react. Responding meaning pause before you say anything, do anything, think anything, and employ empathy and compassion in that situation. And that could be towards whomever it's appropriate. If you can analyze what you're up against, it's easier to figure it out. Don't just react. That's not the happiness way.
No, that's a great point. I mean, we've been trying to teach that for 4 years as well. But this was really, really interesting and really, really powerful stuff. And so I'm so glad you came on.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, it was, I love learning, and I learn stuff from everybody I have on, and you've taught me some stuff today. So where do we get in touch with you, and what do you do out there?
Well, I'm getting out there everywhere that'll have me at the moment. So if this subject, and the thing about happiness is it's really broad spectrum. I can talk on a lot of different things and relate it to a lot of different scenarios, and kids and adults alike. So I've been doing lunch and learns and podcasts and speaking, keynote speaking, wherever seems appropriate. I am happy to show up. And I have a YouTube channel that I put a 10-part learning series into. And it's basically just the Mission Happy Lab, YouTube. And I'm on all the social media apps. So TikTok, what are they? Instagram, Facebook, Threads. Yeah. And my website is themissionhappylab.com.
Perfect. Those are all going to be in our show notes. So it's all great. So thank you for coming on, and it was great. I learned a lot, and I hope our listeners did too.
Thank you so much, Karen.
Thank you for joining today's discussion with our divorce expert. Check out the show notes for more about our guest. If you're finding value in our podcast, follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and our YouTube channel at Divorce Workshop. Share your questions, comments, or guest suggestions. We'd love to hear from you. For a comprehensive divorce guide, check out our Just Separated workbook on Amazon worldwide. This workbook covers everything from emotions and co-parenting to finances, legal insights, and recovery. A must-have for anyone navigating separation or divorce.